welcome to another VeVe Roundtable event. And this one's going to be an amazing one because we've got an amazing panel of people here to chat with us. I'm just going to do a really quick who's who in the room. And I think Diana has like a cool game for everyone to introduce themselves just a little bit deeper. So starting from the top, as I'm seeing it, might be a little different for all of you. We've got David Yu, CEO, co-founder of VeVe, and a big fan of Daniel Wu. And with that said, we've got Daniel Wu, actor, director, producer, race car driver, and now comic book creator. Sean Chen, DC and Marvel artist, co-creator of Evermind. Carl Choi, founder of 24/7 Comics, and a real physical to digital pioneer. Really excited to hear what you have to say for this one. We've got Swagglehaus, an amazing comic creator, but also writer and director. And then, of course, Diana, gamer, influencer marketer, and exceptional teammate to me here at VeVe. And I'm your host, Corey. And so I'll turn it over to Diana. You got a cool game for us to play?
Well, not so much a cool game, but just a pretty chill question just to break the ice. What are you guys reading at the moment, if you're reading anything, whether it's comics, books, etc.?
I mean, I'll jump in. My favorite is Daniel Warren Johnson's Do a Powerbomb. I was a huge wrestling fan as a kid, kind of went away from it, and then he literally brought me back. And I'm currently reading Lady Mechanica by Joe Bennett. He was former Top Cow / was on Darkness and whatnot, and I just had dinner from the other night, so I felt obligated to dive into his IP.
Very cool. David, why don't you go next?
What am I reading? X-Men 97.
Nice.
If you haven't got it on VeVe, you can get it on the ECL now. We've still got a few copies. Obviously, the last few days I've been... Kyle was kind enough to send me the link to Evermind, so I did read 1, 2, 3 privately.
Lucky.
Won't be giving away too much spoiler alert today, so yeah.
Daniel, could you go next?
I'm not reading anything at the moment because I'm working on a movie, and when I work on movies, I don't like to read fiction to influence the way I'm thinking. But the last thing I read was during Chinese New Year was Jean Lun Yang's graphic novel, Lunar New Year Love Story. Not a typical comic book, but it was an interesting read.
Very cool. Swagglehaus?
Yeah, I'm actually at this moment, I'm reading The Last Ronin, the collected edition by Laird and Eastman, which of course is like the kind of retelling or picking up the story of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle universe. I really loved it when it first came out, the first issue, but as comics tend to take some time to get them all collected, I wanted to wait. So I finally got the trade, and that's the one that I'm taking my time with and really just enjoying.
That's an exciting one. With the talks of potential movie in the future, like the Ninja Turtle, the mania is grabbing everyone. I'm involved with it. I have like buying the retro remake toys because I can't afford like the actual retro toys. I go in the LCS and I just cry because they're too expensive. Sean, next.
Right now, I'm really into Ultimate Spider-Man with primarily for the art. Marco Cicchetto is, I think, is a brilliant artist. And I really like how it feels like the comics, the comics are kind of a little bit gone astray and are kind of weird now. And this is kind of like a blast from the past that really does, I think, connect with a lot of people. So I'm really into that book.
Very cool.
Amazing.
What are you reading, Diana?
I'm actually like David. I'm reading X-Men 97, as I would. Yeah, it's been really good.
I'm reading Spider-Boy with my oldest. My oldest is 8, so he's super into that. I'm rereading One Punch Man, so I'm kind of burning through that one again because that's a fun one. And then I like to have greens and desserts whenever I'm reading, so like books that make me smarter and books that just make me happier. And so my greens is the untold stories of Marvel Comics because it's kind of my gig here at VeVe is learning about comics and collectibles and all that good stuff.
Well, now that we all know each other just a little bit better because you can learn a lot about someone by what they're reading, let's dive right into the questions. Maybe we can start, Diana, with the co-creators of a very special comic that we will be talking about today, Evermind.
I guess the first question I have is for Daniel. How did you end up where you are? How did your path start?
I'll give you the short version. Which is in 1997, I graduated from college in architecture. I knew I wasn't going to go into the profession. So I went on a graduation trip to find myself. And I went to Hong Kong because Hong Kong was, Hong Kong was going back to China in 1997. There was a big kind of handover ceremony. So I wanted to see that. I was in Hong Kong for a little while and then I got spotted on the street to do a TV commercial by a scout. And so I did this TV commercial. Then it came out a month later, and a director saw it, called me into their office for an interview. I went and saw that. It did that interview, had a chat with him. He asked me to be the lead in his film. I said, "What are you talking about? You're crazy. I've never acted in a movie before, and Chinese is not my first language. So I don't think I can do this." I turned it down. For 3 or 4 weeks, he kept asking me to do it. And in the end, I said, "Okay, if you don't blame me for screwing it up, I'll give it a shot." So I fell into it. And then a week after that, I ran into Jackie Chan at a party, and he signed me up to his management company. I was like, "Sure, I don't know anybody in this town, but you, I know. And I think I would be in good hands with you." So I ended up falling into Jackie Chan's hands as manager for like 12 years, and then started a film career as an actor in Hong Kong for 25 years, basically. And I did like almost 70 films during that period before coming back to the United States to do Into the Badlands.
That is so awesome. Oh my gosh, what a story.
Crazy.
Obviously, David, you're a big fan of Daniel, so I'm going to give you the floor now to ask any of your questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge Daniel fan, and huge Hong Kong action cinema. I mean, I grew up in the same time where the Hong Kong action film has just become big, and I think a lot of the Daniel film did, with Jackie Chan, Shinjuku incident, that was cool one, the new police story, and obviously Daniel's one of the star as Monkey King in American Born Chinese, which is on Disney Plus. And my question with Daniel will be, if you had a chance with any superpower for you as a character in real life, what would you want to have? It can be anything from any of the comic superhero.
I think it would be invisibility, because I'm a massive voyeur, but since I've become who I am, I don't get to watch people as much as people watch me. So to be invisible and to disappear and be able to observe situations, I would love that.
Yeah, that's very, very cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks, David, and thanks, Daniel, for that. My next question is for Carl and Mickey. How did you both get into, comics and collecting?
Mickey, go for it.
Me? All right. Well, I'll date myself a little bit, but I always say that I was, a comic book fan that spawned out of the Tim Burton Batman films. If you guys are familiar with the history, when Tim Burton did the original Batman series, that kind of created a massive kind of boom into comic books. Tons of comic stores opened up after that. So it probably would have been, me at 6 years old watching that movie that summer, and then my dad immediately taking us from movie theater into comic book store and, buying up all the Batman and Spider-Man comics after that. So I've always been a lifelong collector, a fan of comic books, someone who's really into genre storytelling my entire life. Later on in life, got into the film industry. I've been a writer and director for 15 years. Started in music, where I've directed over 150 music videos for all different kinds of artists over the years. And that's actually where I originally met Carl, who also has a history in music and stuff, which I'm sure he'll tell you about. But our paths sort of crossed there. And then later on, throughout the COVID, when everything was locked down, and I had nothing going on for my film aspect of my career, I decided to make a YouTube channel to celebrate my love of comic books, just to have something to connect with the community and talk about, comic books and collecting and different sort of things that I love to enjoy. And I think it was probably somewhere in that time where Carl discovered that I had my YouTube channel and I was talking about comic books. So we sort of reconnected with that, and he kind of brought me on to help do some of the creative work for 24/7 Comics. So that's kind of my little intro into how I'm with you guys here today and how I started with comic books, and got a chance to work on Evermind with everybody you see on screen.
That's awesome. What about yourself, Carl?
Comic books saved my life. I was born in Hong Kong, immigrated to the U.S. when I was 8 years old. I didn't know the language, didn't know the culture. I'm dyslexic, heavily dyslexic, and it just had a hard time learning in school. But my cousin wanted to stop by a comic book shop one day, and we walked in, and I was like, what is this place? And started flipping through the comics. I remember leaving with Frank Miller's Wolverine miniseries, and then going home, diving into it, and fell in love with the craft. And even Wolverine was like the dude that I really connected with. And so I remember going to the comic book shop pretty much every week until I was about 13, where the comic book shop actually gave me a job. And so I basically worked there for the next few years and then even helped open another store. And I always remember there was a moment where I discovered Pogs in high school, and then I brought it to our comic book shop, and then it was like the biggest sale item, and then LA Times came to interview me. So that was my 5 seconds of fame. And so after that, grew up, got into entertainment industry, similar to Mickey actually, worked in music, film, TV, and then now doing what we're doing here today as a publisher.
And unfortunately, while Carl was giving us a little bit of his backstory there, Sean disconnected. So I'm going to do my best to kind of fill that gap, give you just a quick breakdown, and hopefully Sean jumps back in so we can get some slick sound bites from him. But Sean, from what I know, got his start back in the Valiant comic days, which is such a cool era for comics. And for you 80s and 90s babies, you're gonna know these major titles like Man of War, Bloodshot, Arbringer, Rye and the Future Force. And after Valiant, he'd move right on over into Marvel and DC, and he would touch pretty much every title that all of us know and love. And in Sean's works in the past, it was pretty much always the art. And so the really cool thing with Evermind, which we'll be talking about today, is that was sort of his big transition into writing. So I'm hoping he pops back in so we can pick his brain a little bit about that transition from just art into art and writing and co-creating along with Daniel Evermind. But I'll let Diana take the reins. Let's move this thing forward.
Yeah, especially when like the last question I have for all of you before we roll into some fun stuff is, what do you love collecting besides comics and more, geeky stuff? Is there anything out of the ordinary that you collect that you can share with us?
Oh God, for me, I'm like a collector or an addict in denial. So I'll go through phases where I collect a bunch of things and then I go, that's enough. And then I push it away or maybe even try and give it away. And then I find something else. So like everything from sneakers to comics to DVDs. Back in the day, I have like hundreds and hundreds of DVDs that are in storage somewhere. And now recently it's been cars. But I'm trying to stop. I'm trying to stop this addiction, this crazy addiction I have. But again, I'll stop it and then I'll latch onto something else and then I'll start again. So I feel like I'm in a lull right now and I'm in the denial phase again where I don't have anything. But I'm sure something will catch me very soon, and then I won't be able to turn around again.
It's a little bit like me with my Xbox controllers and comic books.
Yeah, you sit in it once in a while and you see it all, and you're like, what was I thinking? And then you just go through this phase where like, okay, I got to get rid of it, give it away, give it to people, and then it goes away, and then something else catches your attention again, and it starts up all over again. It's like, I realize like over 40 years of this is like, I am an addict.
You're in good company.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that to be the one thing that sort of makes it hard to what you're asking with the question, hard to kind of diversify into other like little weird collectible things, because I just know how deep you could potentially go and how passionate you can, get involved with all these other collectibles. So for me personally, the thing that I, really deep dive into is comic books. And from time to time, I'll look at, art and paintings and, motorcycles and all these other things that I could really get into if I really wanted to. But it's hard for me to fully go down those other paths because I know that I still have goals within this one right here. So it kind of is like I have a big appreciation for all the other collectibles. And I very much enjoy hearing about people talk about other things that they're passionate about within the collecting world. I haven't quite dove into those avenues, at least not yet.
That's fair enough. Quite smart as well.
Yeah.
Carl, what about yourself?
Yeah, so I've always been a collector of a lot of stuff, but it's funny because I think Daniel and I, even though we crossed paths during the time of film and TV, we always related on like pop culture art. And then we're into like random movies and documentary. We'll like hang at the house and just watch stuff. And so we always related in that connection. And then David and I connected through original comic art. And so art collecting has always been a big part of my life. And then I'm also really into Magic the Gathering. So I have a ton of cards, way too much.
Where do you keep all that stuff? This is the problem I have. Is like I don't place for it all anymore.
David, tell him how to do it. You just got to build warehouses, right?
Yeah, you have to open a gallery.
Yeah, I got a few warehouse full of them. I do have to start a library, everything now. I'm more similar. It's just hoarding and just collecting. And you pick it up, you see it, and you just go, oh, maybe I should add a couple more things to this collection. And I go through that phase as well. I bring them out, I display them all, and the new season comes, something else is huge. Like Wolverine's huge, with the anniversary coming up. And I bring all the Wolverine products I collected over the last 20 years out. So, yeah, I go through cycles of it, similar. Yeah, but it gets to, it's quite addictive. A very expensive hobby, so I would not recommend anyone. But like Carl mentioned, we connected very well with art. I think artwork is something communicate about the person's personality and so on, what they're interested in, and always become a conversation opener. So anything in that, and that's what fandom's all about, isn't it? It's about opening that conversation and have that similar interest with one and another.
Let's move forward. We have an announcement to make, and there's a reason that we have all these illustrious people together. They're all tied together for a particular purpose. David, do you want to do the announcement for what is coming to VeVe, and then we can pick the brains of the amazing people here to talk a little bit about what it is?
Yeah, so we have a very exciting announcement today to share with our VeVe fans. Thousands and thousands of fans are looking for new content. So we spotted this with Kyle as a friend, announcing the Evermind comic book series developed by Daniel and Sean, and we are going to be releasing this on VeVe. So let's talk more about it.
Carl, can you give us a brief breakdown of what Evermind is all about? I know the people that have been reading it already love it, but for those folks who might be picking this thing up for the first time, what can they expect?
Sure, Corey. The story of Evermind is about Lucas Zhang, a world-renowned scientist who actually believes human evolution has come to an end. And the reason is because he actually figured out a way to transfer human consciousness into androids. And, who would love this technology? Of course, the world of amusement parks and the world of the military. And both of these worlds give him resources to make his dreams come true. But unfortunately, when the two worlds collide and his daughter gets involved, that's where all ish breaks loose. And so that's pretty much the story of Evermind, and we're looking forward to you guys diving into it.
Daniel, do you want to let us know how Evermind came to be and what Evermind is?
Sure. I think Carl was the kind of instigator of it all through 24/7 Comics, his relationship with Sean. And he was really trying to encourage Sean to start writing, going from illustrating to writing. And Sean had expressed an interest in writing. And so they started to develop this project together. And when Sean asked Carl, who should the main character, what should he look like? Carl started giving him pictures of me for some reason. And so then at that phase, that's when Carl had reached out to me about it and go, hey, this is a really cool project. I think it's really interesting. I think you would like it. And, oh, by the way, we made the main character look like you. And so I looked at it, and Carl asked me if I wanted to be, part of the development of the project, kind of advise and counsel Sean along the way as writing this project. And so at first I didn't think I had the chops to do something like that. I've never really worked in the comic book world ever. But then I slowly started to realize that it's just storytelling, and I've been doing that for 30 years as a filmmaker. And so when you look at, character and story and narration and how a narrative works, it's the same in a comic book as it is in a movie. And so I realized very quickly, once we started talking, that this is the same world that I've been working in. And so very quickly was able to jump in there and start giving, advice on how to formulate these characters and make them more three-dimensional and make them work for the narrative.
And Sean, you popped out and you popped back in. We're talking about Evermind #1 now, because we just announced that it's coming to VeVe. We're all super excited about it. Can we get some information from you on your involvement with the creation of it?
Okay, so originally, Carl and I were developing the story together. And as we were trying to come up with the character and the events that happened in the story, the main character was always kind of conceived of as there was a blank placeholder for, the arrogant scientist. And that worked fine for all of the development process. But when it came time to finally put pencil to paper and actually draw these characters for the first time, it just dawned on me that I never really thought about what he looked like. So I asked Carl, and I was wondering whether he had something in mind, and he very quickly said, "Absolutely, draw Daniel Wu." And I'm like, okay, that's great. He fits that role perfectly. That's the first time I've discovered that this character is Asian. But so that's how open it was before. So I was drawing him, kind of using his likeness, not so specifically that we can get sued by him if he ever found out, but just to draw a guy who kind of fits that character. And then after a while, I think Carl was getting very excited about where this was going, and he says, "I bet if I bring this to Daniel Wu, that he might like it." And for me, it's like I don't really know. I mean, he could just say like, "Oh, I'm busy," because you never know someone's reaction to something you've created. But surprisingly, Carl told me that he was on board with he wanted to be part of it. And when I say he wanted to be part of it, he actually did participate. He would be in the meetings, coming with ideas. And one thing that Daniel was great at, and all actors in general, I think a lot of actors are really into backstory because they have to deliver a nuanced performance, and they're constantly, even more than the director. The director only cares about what's happening on the screen at that time, but the actor has to reach all the way back into the character's childhood, and that to me really excited because I have to do it as a writer, and I could really use some help on it. And Daniel's life, he can really speak to exactly those things that the character Lucas Song was wrestling with. So he was a great help with that. So it's great having him on board. He's a great creative partner.
Really appreciate that deeper insight into this whole thing, Sean. It helps us tie together how you, Carl, and Daniel have been working together to make this happen. Now, Carl, as the publisher, 24/7 Comics, tell us a little bit more about sort of the 360 approach to your IP. A lot of people maybe release a comic and that's all they have in mind. But 24/7 sort of looks at things in terms of what all could we do with this IP. Could you just tell us a little bit more about that and what the goals are potentially?
Yeah, so first I guess we should talk a little bit about 24/7 Comics. For me, work in film and TV, and then we're actually looking for IP in the comic book space to adapt into film and television. And one of the things we learned was much of the IP that's out there has already been picked up by all the movie studios. And when I speak to a lot of the creators out there, it wasn't like people were upset that they were getting these like option checks, but they were actually a little disappointed often their projects being shelved or like hearing no news after years, right? And so what I did was start working with a lot of these creators and say, hey, what would be like the right way to do this? And so one thing we learned about publishing is obviously there's really just two routes. There's like the big two, where you're basically told what to write, what to draw. You get a steady paycheck, but you're worked on like these crazy timelines. On the other side is really about taking your own risks, going out there and putting it through as a creator own. But what I didn't know was how 99% of them struggle to generate revenue for the creators. And so what we did was co-created this idea of partnership publishing. And the idea for 24/7 Comics was always to be a creator-led venture where the creators are partners. So Sean, Daniel, Mickey, everyone who's involved, not only are they creators within the ecosystem of 24/7, they're also stakeholders in the publishing company itself. And so our goal is really to come along as a crew, really move together and be able to create stories that moves the needle. And so I think because we come from, in a way, outside the industry, it allows us to be flexible in that way. And so when Sean and I actually crossed paths in the advertising industries, he had actually taken about, I think, a decade off from comics. He was doing a lot of storyboarding and concept art for advertising. At the time, I was running an agency representing all the movie studios doing these experiential activations. And so one of the things that we started connecting on was during the pandemic, he started putting out this Instagram comic book. And this comic book was super cool. It's called The Wingman, and he just put out these panels and people started following it. And then we decided to just put it out just for fun. And there was a bit of a fan base. But the more we got to know each other, the more I realized he actually wanted to tell his own story. And that's kind of how Evermind came about. And it was really funny because I think it was very organic in a way, as much as, I did reach out to Daniel at some point after kind of like his face had already kind of found itself inside the pages of Evermind. But in a way, it was cool because Daniel was already kind of starting to work on American-born Chinese. We're talking about comics, and then it was organic in a way where, Daniel and I always talk a lot about the future, and especially being Asian Americans in Hollywood, we have to carve our own way. And so in a way, what I saw how Evermind and Daniel came together was almost like, it takes time for IP to get on screen. So Daniel, like, what kind of role would be fitting for you 10 years from now? And I remember that conversation, and I think it kind of led to Evermind and this role, which is a world-renowned scientist with a father and daughter story, which was also very relatable as I kind of watched Daniel interact with his daughter in the house. And I thought it was very interesting. And then since then, he's been able to contribute a lot of the character pieces to Evermind. And I think with any story, it's really about the characters, and everything else is just wrappers for us to follow, right?
I think you touched on a really important point, which is that in entertainment, but also in the comic book world, there's a lot of permission is given by gatekeepers, right? And the gatekeepers are sitting on top, and there's so many people that are creative that don't have a say in those decisions, right? But they're the ones that are creating the content. And so we wanted to like kind of cut out the gatekeeper and just do our own stuff, right? And so, as a comic book, but also as IP for something else, if this can turn into, a television series or a studio, whatever, we want to go ahead and develop it without having to ask for permission and just do it on our own. I think that is going to be the future anyway, because I feel like that the audience is demanding that also. And I'm also, having been in the entertainment industry for so long, things that are made by committee or people that are not creative and giving their notes usually don't turn out that great, right? And so we need to give back power to the people who have the creative ability to do the creative, and then let the executives do the other stuff, the business side, the marketing, whatever. And so part of this, huge decision for us was to gain back control.
It's interesting because we've talked with other independent artists and creators in the comic industry, and one of the challenges of not having that committee is sort of the unlimited creativity that you have, and how do you focus unlimited ideas to create a cohesive story that people are going to like. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges of the conceptualization of the idea itself, like the story itself?
That's probably a good Sean question from a creator perspective.
Definitely. When I worked for Marvel and DC, the stories came from a writer, and there was an editor overseeing everything. My job was very narrow and specific in that I would try to second guess what the writer is thinking in his head in terms of visuals, and I'm in a service profession where I have to kind of deliver what everyone's thinking. So that kind of kept the reins in, and if you're an obsessive perfectionist, at least it narrows it down to something that's manageable. So taking over the reins of writing and actually creating this whole universe from the start, after doing maybe 25 years of comics from Marvel and DC, there is a danger in, because there's so much pent up creative energy, to kind of just explode with all this stuff, and it goes all over the place. And then you can very quickly become overwhelmed because there's nothing to constrain it. So the job for me was basically to create these constraints that actually make the book better by focusing it on a theme and keeping it on a path so that it reads much better than, I just know from a lot of creators, they'll create this big sci-fi epic that just is kind of unmanageable, especially and never really gets done because it's too big of a story. And then if it does get started, it never finishes because it's just too big. With what Carl is to try to really constrain it down to a theme and tell a very tight story and make it manageable in 6 issues. And I think we've done that with Evermind.
Really love that insight, Sean. And you touched on science fiction. For those people on VeVe that are going to be picking this thing up for the very first time, we know there's the dedicated fan base that already loves this thing. But for our collectors who do more than just collect, they love to read, tell us a little bit more about science fiction. Why did you pick science fiction?
I've always liked science fiction. I think it kind of stems from, I like my love for the movies. I think Blade Runner, The Road Warrior is sort of like science fiction, and also Star Wars and the current Dune movies. Something about those really strike a chord with me, especially being an artist when you're visual. Just about anything that comes across in the story that you deal with, like cars or fashion or technology, we know the way it exists now, and we're familiar with it, and in a sense that becomes kind of like every day. But science fiction takes it one step further because it's so speculative, and that's where the cool factor comes in. So, like we're familiar with cars now, and they're pretty cool now, but then in the future they can be even cooler. So, the visual aspect of it is what really appealed to me, and I think also there's a little bit of I'm not trying to get ahead of like the superhero kind of fatigue that's kind of going on, but it just seems like when a lot of the comic book artists who work for Marvel and DC, when they move on, they a lot of times they go to areas like fantasy or science fiction, as if that's like the new frontier. So, I will also say another thing, like comics in general, the superhero comics were originally designed for kind of children, young boys in particular. And then when we get into creating them, like we're young people creating them, and we have that male power fantasy that's really understandable. Especially when you're young, you can't really control the situations in the world. You might get bullied, and then you can fantasize about being able to be a super strong person that controls everything. But as you get older and mature, you should have all that under control. So you start looking for other areas to apply your storytelling. And I think science fiction, just the speculative nature of it and how you can actually say a lot about the current world situations through some sort of like parable. I find that you can't do that as much in superhero type stories. So I was always a science fiction guy. I just love the way it looks, and I love the potential for sort of like an author's point of view that can be expressed through it.
Thank you so much for that, Sean. And I, as a super sci-fi fan, Star Wars, Fallout, Dune, everything you've mentioned, very, very excited that you chose science fiction as the focus. And with that said, I wanted to now bring David in and talk about how did you discover Evermind and what was the initial conversation like?
Me and Carl got connected through another mutual friend in the comic industry, who is also well known in VeVe. And Carl we jumped on the Zoom call, and obviously with his backdrop in the back, I straight away I knew this guy's a collector. So I think Carl, if I remember, it was almost like flexing, and I had to bring out some of my artwork. He started bringing out, and at that time I was very into Riccardo, this Italian artist, and then he bought his one out. I'm going, my God, this guy is really into comic art, really understood it. And Carl sent me through a PDF version of Evermind to read. And I mean, some of the cover artists is already known to VeVe. I mean, you got Sean Chen, who did exclusive cover for us in Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man number 14. That was a Green Goblin. He also did the Young Avengers, the Kate Bishop. And then there was a Jim Mahfood cover, who was featured on VeVe as well. He's one of our decon artists back in 21 to 22 who did the pop art. And you got Ike, who's just recently come onto VeVe with his artwork through Spider-Man number 18. So, I mean, the caliber of the artists in the writing, and then, obviously with Daniel Wu, I got to have this on VeVe. I read through the first few pages. I think Carl didn't send me the whole thing. And the character straight away, as Daniel mentioned, it looked like him on the front cover straight away, and I go, oh well, Lucas the scientist must be him, and this could be an elevated movie, whole thing, blockbuster. And I'm thinking Walking Dead, man, when no one picked up Walking Dead as a comic and it become a blockbuster movie, and this could be possibly a hit. So through that connection, as a fandom, and a lot of you guys will know, VeVe is not just about large publishers or Marvel or the DCs that we have in Disney. We're about celebrating artists and new emerging comic writers. So I thought this is a great platform. And one of the other thing was Carl really understood that the digital medium and the reach that can get out to. And that so through that that connection, I thought this is definitely worthwhile having on VeVe. And by the way, I read book number 1 to 3, past couple of days, the artwork is spectacular. It's very high quality artwork. The detail in it, some of the detail brought me back to like the G.I. Joe day, and then there's the Marvel feel, and then there's a little bit of that manga feel, the whole thing. You guys definitely, if you love comic artwork, and love Sean's and Daniel's work, this is it. It's pretty cool.
Unfortunately, Sean fell out again while David was talking there. The internet gods are not being kind to us today. If you don't pop back in, Sean, thank you so much for coming to chat with us. Maybe you'll pop in, maybe you won't. But moving forward, Swagglehaus, I want to turn the conversation towards you. You hosted the 24/7 launch event for Evermind, and you've also done a lot of amazing videos on your video that focus on Evermind. So I thought you'd be the perfect person to ask, what's the fan reception been around this launch event? And also, could you talk to us a little bit about the Kickstarter, because this whole thing was fan supported?
Yeah, well, from my standpoint, I mean, when Carl and the guys here, initially created Evermind, originally it was maybe going to be something that was going to live through the 24/7 comics kind of reader and world and that sort of that venue. But I think, in having discussions with Carl and our love for, physical collecting and stuff, and sort of where, being able to get the book into kind of the audience's hands and being sort of direct, I think it kind of made a lot more sense to find that audience and do it through a Kickstarter. And, here on my YouTube channel and in the digital space that we're in right now and the people watching this, there's an entire kind of community and ecosystem that exists just within the online space. And that's kind of where a lot of people are kind of finding, the stories they want to read or interesting, IPs that they want to, consume. And so it made a lot of sense to kind of bring a physical version of the comic book out there first, find that initial audience, get people engaged, have them learn about the story, have them learn about, Sean and Daniel's perspectives on it and what they're trying to achieve with it. And so, yeah, we put together that Kickstarter, tried to help, on my YouTube channel, get the word out as much as I could. And they had a lot of great, success with it, getting a lot of support and backers. And obviously with Kickstarter, it's just kind of a whole other machine as far as like what you have to do to be successful. And it's a different kind of venue and marketing push, and you kind of create rewards and incentive structures. But it can be a really like fun kind of bespoke way for people to get involved with that story and build that initial fan base.
I'd like to add that the Kickstarter thing also is kind of part of our whole ethos of what I was talking about earlier, getting rid of the gatekeeper, right? And so with having the audience basically buy into it, that was the proof that this thing can work, right? And that if it's successful that way, then you have a built-in audience already, and then you can move forward with a bunch of other things. So it gives you kind of a formula, a way forward in terms of how to make it, and also how to market it, but also how that you already have a built-in audience, right? And then you can leverage, Sean's fans, my fans, already together. That's enough of people to get this thing made and published. And we don't have to wait for a gatekeeper to go, okay, we deem you, honored to be able to publish something. No, we don't need that. We're just going to do it ourselves.
Picking up off of what Daniel was saying, it's you have this sort of direct personal feedback with the people who are reading it. With all the other things, like if you wanted to make this into, a traditional publishing company, or let's say you were pitching this as a screenplay, a film, like everyone has certain goals that they need to achieve, which might not be, conducive to like the story that you actually want to tell or whatever it is. So there's all these obstacles that you have to go through. So it's the most, creatively satisfying version, the purest version of that sort of storytelling, because Daniel and Sean get to do what they want to do and set out to achieve what they can achieve. And the only feedback that they're really concerned with is if people didn't like it, or they did like it, or they're like, hey, I really like this character, I'd like to learn more about this character. And then that can be, the way to inform where the story goes next for the guys.
I would actually love to ask Daniel, obviously, as an actor in film and then now transitioning into comic book creation. What opportunities do you see comic books when it comes to storytelling compared to film?
I think with comic books, you can be a lot more uninhibited, because the problem I have with filmmaking storytelling is I immediately think about budget. And so when I start to get creative, I start to go, well, that's going to cost a lot. So let's think of something else, or let's scale it down. Whereas in comic books, it's really all about your imagination as much as Sean can draw, and Sean can draw anything, right? So we can really just let go and just go crazy on the world building. A lot of projects in terms of film is like, what your budget is, and that you don't have that much budget to do world building, so you just have to scale it all down. Very rarely do you get projects like Into the Badlands where they gave us tons of budget to do world building, and so I think what I love about comics is that you are totally uninhibited like that, and just can go ham and go crazy. And also what I like about it is that essentially what you're doing with the comic book is you're creating a storyboard for if you want to go further with it into television series or a movie, you have it already there, right? And so it becomes a very easy transition or adaptation towards a screenplay, towards something that you can make into film. But it also becomes a really great calling card to pitch to studios, right? Because you go, okay, I have this. These are the storyboards. This is what the world's going to look like. And what I realized with pitching to executives, their imaginations are not very good. You have to do a lot of explaining, a lot of showing to them to know what's going on. And so with a comic book, and if it's already done, just send them the comic book. They look at it, they'll get it right away, or they won't. And it's a very simple matter right there. And so it becomes a lot easier for the next phase of the project once you have that down.
I suppose my next question then is for Carl and Mickey. When it comes to the future of digital comics, like Evermind, do you think you'll see, or we'll see, digital surpass physical at some point in the future?
You gotta take, Carl.
Sure, I'll jump in. So I think it already has. When it comes to viewership and readership, if you kind of just look at online traffic, it's already shown to have way surpassed physical. But I actually don't believe physical will go away. In fact, we're seeing some of the biggest sales in comic book history with Transformers, with Thundercats, a lot of these IPs coming back. It's really hitting this like nostalgia, moment. And I feel like this is also a really good time to introduce new IP, because a lot of new eyeballs are coming into the space and they're reading comics again. And I feel like as much as we may want to, fight against it often as a studio level, piracy is very real. And I don't think you could avoid that. But I think it is through solutions like VeVe where it gives actual collectible value to its the fan base as well as the community, that we're going to be able to solve this value capture issue that we're facing right now. But I do feel like at this point, we grew up in a generation that anything digital can be free if you just spend some time looking for it. But if you're able to bring value to your consumers and give it a suitable collectible ecosystem, then I think that will further grow the collectability of digital products.
I don't think physical will ever totally go away, because clearly, the six of us who are addict collectors here, like, we want stuff, right? We want to have something in our hands or to put on the wall to look at. And the digital stuff, it's like, if it's in your computer, like, for example, taking photos, and how often do you actually look back at the photos you've taken in your phone, right? They're just there in your phone. But when you have a physical print on the wall, framed there nicely, it's this beautiful thing you look at all the time. And the physical thing, we're human beings. We like that physical side of things, and to like to have things, and like to be able to pass things off and give things to people. And so I think that'll never go away. It'll just change. I think it'll go hand in hand with the digital. And so we'll probably have, more limited edition things, special collector item things. I don't know if there's any more foil print covers going out, but stuff like that will happen. Those kind of novelty items, those will always be around, I think. So it'll always be there, I think.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I'm very much like that. I have to hold one and then read on my phone instead.
Yeah, I think I would just echo what the guys have said. I think it's there's going to be place for both of them, and I think both of them are going to have kind of their own audiences in a way. And there's going to be those who need the tactile feel and they want to read, the physical issue, and there's going to be people who, are going to put on their Quest headset and walk around the VeVe vault and like, you know, look at giant panels in front of them, and they're going to really enjoy that. So I think, if anything, what's cool to me about VeVe, especially from my perspective when it comes to like my YouTube, you know, the people who are like in the physical collecting space, you know, some of them are really into VeVe, and then some others they're not so like, or they don't get it. Like me personally, I have like such a history coming through video games and being a lifelong video game player and working at Riot Games and doing stuff over there. And it's kind of like, I have like an understanding of the digital collectible space and like how you can have kind of equity into this like, you know, virtual account, that I think people who are younger are probably going to have more of a proclivity to it already, because they're already, you know, living a digital existence in a lot of ways. So it's just going to be different. It's going to change. There's going to be audiences for each of them. But I don't think, you know, the physical side will ever really go away. And at the end of the day, it's just, you know, to the point of the conversation, it's really just storytelling, how people want to consume their comic books, and digital is just one different avenue for that.
Yeah, in fact, I've met a good number of VeVe collectors who said they discovered their local comic book shop because of VeVe.
Yeah.
Because they were digital collectors first, and then eventually kind of learning all the different drops, the historical drops, it made them want to own the physical issue. So they went to the local comic book shop and start collecting physical. So I think there is a relationship that's going to be a little bit more refined and clear as time passes. But I do feel like, and that's actually, if you know, Corey, answering your question earlier, if there was like a kind of a quest for 24/7 comics, is really trying to figure out that relationship between the digital and physical.
You know, there's the collectability of a thing, and then there's the ability for you to interact with the thing. And I think one isn't greater than the other. One just allows you to enjoy both. And so there's a first release or first appearance digital collectible, which will always be valuable, but you can put that and you can play with it. You can read your grails. Like, that's a thing that I talk to about anytime I'm with, you know, a comic creator or someone that's really into physical comics. Just like Mickey in his background there, we all have all these cased comics, but, you know, if my son wants to read those, he can't. Like, I'm not gonna, you know, break out a hacksaw and hack open. But on VeVe, he can. You know, I can put that comic out in AR and we can go through. My oldest son's name is Thor. And so, like, Jim 83, you know, that's my favorite comic. I could read that comic with him. You know, we can put it in the bed. We can read through it in AR. Nothing's going to be destroyed. That comic remains valuable. And so for me, as sort of an observer of the space, it's just another category of collecting. Maybe one will never be greater than the other. But I do think that there's a sort of a mutual beneficial nature there where they both benefit each other. David, you have to have thoughts on this. I mean, this is your life. This is what you do.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest take on why we're doing the VeVe comics is the retail shop around the world. Getting that same day cover release is almost impossible if you live in Tokyo, and the product have to be shipped out from the US. By the time you get it, you know, the retail store's already a couple issues behind. So digital medium is a way for a new distribution and that supply chain just to speed up. The other important part, which I think is during COVID period, a lot of these talent artists coming out with their creativity, it allows that a new medium for them to test the market by bringing out a digital version before they go to physical print to see if the demands are up there. These are some of the key aspects which I see, and obviously the technology that we use for that authenticity and that provenance through the blockchain side is really giving that user that unique ownership number. And I think that's one of the barriers where in the past years, 10 years ago, where when you buy a digital, you really just think as a PDF file. Where now, I mean, VeVe Comics, and I only found this out the other day, if I tried to do a screen record of the comic I'm reading, it actually blanks out. So we haven't just solved the issue around, you know, supply chain. We also helping to solve that copyright and IP ownership because I was trying to share with a friend of mine which page I'm reading and what's about, and I screenshot it and it just got blank. It says you can't really record this page.
I love how David tried to bootleg his own app. And that speaks to a really powerful message, because one of the things Steve Jobs always say is everything it needs to be intuitive, and that also means security needs to protect against human intuitivity. And so why I love the blockchain and even just the technology behind the transparency and the print run, which I think is genius, is because I won't say which creator this is, but I met with a superstar creator. We had lunch, and he brought me a signed copy of a very valuable comic. And I said, "Oh, thank you." And he's like, "Oh, no big deal." I was like, "Dude, this is a lot." And he's like, No big deal. I just found a pallet of it in my garage. So like, I still have a bunch of them. I'm like, what? And so in the 90s, we grew up and we value all these comics, but we have no transparency as to how many copies are out there. So like any given comic, I mean, I don't know, maybe not all of the comics on Mickey's wall, but maybe a handful I could see could potentially have a pallet in a warehouse somewhere. And we don't know about that. And so with digital transparency, I feel like it's gonna actually really create true value for collectors in the long run. And I know it's not something that's normal, let's say, to like the old school collectors, but I think it will get normalized as the kind of what Mickey was sharing earlier, the video game generation, who really can see the equity in digital ownership, start seeing that these numbers are very limited. Like, I'm not a huge, crazy, variant collector guy, but I like how we are actually coming out with different variant covers with true limitation, because often we see certain variant covers, it's supposed to be more rare, but there's like more variant printed than like the main issue, which is kind of crazy, right? And so, yeah, I really like the structure of how everything is and where it's going digitally. And I think it's just going to take some time to adopt. And, similar to how when people said streaming was going to kill movie theaters, I don't think so. I think if anything else, like movie theaters are healthier than ever. I went to Alamo Drafthouse and decided to eat dinner there the other night and spent like $60 on dinner, And so that's not what I used to spend on movies, but now I do. So I think there's something to be said about, movies not going away. So I feel like physical also won't go away. So it's going to just figure out a way to live together.
Yeah. It's really exciting, like as far as the potential and the opportunity of what it can be. I mean, the current publishing of comic books, they have a lot of issues, the business, and it's very tough for creators. I guess in any art field, it's always tough for people to, sustain and make livings and keep working stuff. But I think that there's so much opportunity in a digital space and using Web3 and blockchain technology and stuff. If there's people out there that can create, and maybe they can exist in a world where they see some of those secondary market sales and they make a little bit of revenue on those transactions, and that can be something that's very, very sustainable for a lot of creators in the future. So I think there's people that are worried about the technology being disruptive, and some people that maybe are a bit allergic to it. But I think overall it's going to make for a much more healthy industry in the future, and sustainable one. And especially too, like you talk about the kind of just being able to easily pick up, David, like you were just saying, like, oh, you can just bring your comic book anywhere and stuff. And I think one of the reasons why comics were so successful, say in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, is because it really was at that time a little bit more of like a disposable entertainment thing that I could just kind of casually drop a quarter and get it off the shelf as I went into Long's Drugs and those types of places. And over time, that kind of got lost, and now it's a little more of a pricey premium item, and I got to pay a certain amount for that, and you have to go to a hyper specialized comic book store, which, don't get me wrong, I love that whole experience of it, but that has made it difficult in a lot of ways that I think, the casual aspect to it, of it being digital and just someone saying, cool, like $5 on my phone, I can just buy it right now, and then I have it in my pocket and I can read it whenever, and I don't have to worry about bagging and boarding and hoarding and having boxes and stuff. I think that appeals to a lot of people as well. So there's a lot of really excellent things with it that are, I think, positive for the future.
Yeah, I think it's going to be something where it's just hand in hand. Physical and digital are just going to work together. You probably use digital to watch everything, and then the things that you latch onto, or the things that you want to collect, or the things that you like, then you'll start collecting the physical. And so it'll be And I think the digital, like what everyone else is saying, is it allows greater access to much more amount of people. And so that'll be the what draws people in. And I think, it's very important to the industry to have it. But I think it's going to be replacing the physical. It'll just be an extra thing that's onto what we already have.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And speaking of physical and digital, the first thing that people on VeVe are going to do whenever they find out Evermind #1 is coming to VeVe is they're going to try to find the physical version of this comic. Is that a scavenger hunt? Can you give them any clues? What would the process be if they did want to secure any physical copies? And is that even possible?
Yeah, it will be a Easter egg hunt because we released our first exclusive print run on Kickstarter, and that actually ships the same week that we drop on VeVe. And so the only way to find it will probably be on secondary, but it doesn't mean we're going to have a that's going to be it. I think for us, we have every intention to be part of the LCS system and be able to distribute through them. We are also looking at some big box retailers once we finish the trade. So that won't be the end of it, but we are very intentional in each print run. So the Kickstarter print run will be a different set of print run than what we distribute to the stores. And so there will be some around, but you're going to have to look for it. But digitally, it'll only be available on VeVe.
Well, with that, we are rounding out the episode. Let's go around the room, and if you have any final words for our viewers, your fans, whatever, this is your chance to throw them in. Let's keep them around 30 seconds if we can. We will start in my bottom right corner with Swagglehaus.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the channel today. It's been an awesome conversation. And I would just say, if you're out there and interested in learning more about, Evermind, and 24/7 Comics, definitely keep in touch with 247comics.com and stay tuned for what's next with Evermind and all the other comic book series that we have coming out. There's going to be more Kickstarters as well in the future to promote some of the new titles and new series. So we'll definitely let people know about that. But go give 247 Comics a follow so that you guys can stay in tune with that. And then if you are curious about physical comic book collecting and the vintage market, you can look at my YouTube channel called Swagglehaus, and I spend a lot of time talking about vintage collecting and things of that nature. So if you are someone who's in the VeVe space and you're looking at certain keys and stuff and you want to know about the physical counterparts, maybe I'm the channel for you.
Highly recommend, and we'll pop that channel link up right at the bottom. Let's move over to Daniel.
I just want to say this has been a really interesting experience for me, from being, a comic book reader as a kid, a collector, and then stopping for a while, then getting back into it, and then being brought on board as a creator and sort of helping develop a character has been really interesting and really fun. But then also seeing the business side of this, and how we're trying to do very out of the box things with this project has been really a big, huge eye opener for everything from the Kickstarter to getting on VeVe and understanding what VeVe does and what they're doing for the future of comics. Has been really exciting and interesting. It's kind of reinvigorated my cynicism for the entertainment business. And I realized, we do have a lot more control now, and there are fans out there that want really cool stuff. And that we don't, like I keep saying earlier in the interview, is that we don't have to rely on the gatekeepers that give us permission anymore. We can just go do it and give what the fans what they want.
Well, I think it's fair to say that all of us here, Daniel, are very excited to be releasing Evermind here on VeVe. And a big thanks to both you and Sean, the co-creators of the comic, for coming on and talking to us today and giving your love of pop culture and cars and race car driving. I think we will be reaching out to you in the very near future to perhaps hook you up with some really awesome digital collectible cars that are both drivable and displayable here on VeVe. But with that said, let's keep moving. Carl, can you go next, please?
All right, VeVe fam, thanks for having us today. We really enjoyed speaking to you guys. At 24/7 Comics, we're a creator-led entity, and we are doing publishing differently. And the goal is really just to bring you the best work of our creators right to your computer, right to your store, wherever you consume comics. And as the publisher, I'm always here to listen. So feel free to send us a note through any of our socials. And we're excited to see you on VeVe on May 1st for the release of Evermind #1.
We're excited to see it. David?
Hey fans, you have heard from the talents behind this amazing comic. If you missed out your Kickstarter, this is your chance to grab it on VeVe. And just keep in mind there is an app inside the comic, so it's amazing. Looking forward to hear your feedback once you read this.
And so if you backed the Kickstarter for Evermind, you'll be able to redeem a digital copy on VeVe. That'll be reserved just specially for them. Is that correct, Carl?
Yep. Just look out for a code in your inbox, and you'll be able to redeem it.
I wish someone would have told me about Evermind earlier. I would have been a part of that Kickstarter, but no, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much, everyone that came to chat with us. I hope we get to do this again. We'd love to have you back on the show to chat about all things comics, collecting, digital, physical, whatever it might be. And until the next video, best of luck out there, everyone, and happy collecting.